So he will introduce himself.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome. Caro Secretario Generale Bartolomucci, dear students of the Global Governance Program of Tor Vergata University. So indeed, I'm not the ambassador. He was supposed to be here this morning, and then a bit at the last minute, he had to go to the border between France and Italy, because in a few moments there will be a meeting between our new Prime Minister, Michel Barnier, and the Foreign Minister and Vice President of the Government of Italy, Antonio Tajani, and also our Home Affairs Minister. So we're very pleased about that, and the ambassador will be there. So in a way, I'm very fortunate because it gives me the opportunity and the honor to address you. So I'm the Deputy Head of Mission, the Vice Ambassador of the French Embassy to Italy and San Marino. And I've been in the ministry for more than 20 years now, with postings in Berlin, London, Brussels, to the European Union, and with, let's say, a bit of specialization on European issues, also cultural issues. I'm going to make a speech of about 10 minutes. I was I chose the topic of European sovereignty. But after that, I will be more than happy to have a dialogue with you and answer questions on any diplomatic topic whatsoever, without restraining ourselves on the issues I will touch upon. So I've chosen European issues because it's of course a major political and diplomatic priority for France. I don't know how many of you are from the EU. Yeah, if you just raise your hand, it will give me an idea of the crowd. Okay, well, that's a large number, but I hope it be still of general interest. So I'll just say a few words on the huge challenges the EU has been facing recently. So it can be a bit gloomy, but then I will move to obviously what we are doing and what we can do to address those challenges more positively. So obviously, in those recent years, let's say from the UK's Brexit, with the COVID-19 crisis as well, while the EU has been facing quite a lot of challenges. We are very sadly seeing the return of war on the European continent with the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Obviously, we also have war in the Middle East, issues linked with the global climate crisis, not mentioning also technological acceleration, artificial intelligence. But this succession of crises has highlighted European dependence on critical sectors, quite a few: energy, health, digital, industry, technology, food, raw materials. So I'm sure you have heard of Mario Draghi's recent report, which is really of great interest for the French authorities, and which notes that the EU is falling behind our main competitors in terms of growth and competitiveness. And indeed, the Sino-American rivalry has led to the introduction of aggressive industrial policies, such as the IRA, as well as competition for massive investment in key areas such as technology and innovation. For example, in the field of artificial intelligence, which quite rightly is a priority of the Italian current G7 presidency, which is taking quite a lot of our time at the embassy at the moment. Well, we know that private investment in artificial intelligence is 4 times higher in the US as it is in the EU. Just to mention raw materials, we know that 98% of the rare earths that we're using comes from China. So we can see why the European Union's growth model is in danger, and all the more so given the global challenges posed by climate change and the challenges I've already spoken about, but also defense and security issues, obviously. On the other hand, to be more positive, this succession of crises has led to an awakening and a decisive leap forward for Europe in establishing the pillars of European sovereignty, which is a theme France has been working on for a long time by advocating Europe's strategic autonomy. And we are pleased to see that support for this is growing up in the EU. So this sovereignty agenda has been determined at the Versailles Summit in 2022. That was during the French presidency of the European Union. And it laid the foundation for greater technological and industrial sovereignty, aiming to shed our strategic dependencies by strengthening our own capabilities. European member states committed themselves 2 years ago to reducing their dependence on Russian gas, oil, and coal, and to improving European energy efficiency. So while this awareness has been raised, it must continue. We still need to mobilize to build our resilience. In 2024, following the European election and the distribution of responsibilities in the new Commission, which is about to enter into its new duty, we can see the extent to which themes linked to European sovereignty are now clearly reflected in the Commission's priorities. There are commissioners for industrial sovereignty, technological sovereignty, and defense. Nuclear power is finally recognized as a decarbonizing energy. We must continue to push this agenda, particularly in a context where there is a risk of our continent falling behind economically, in order to follow through on this logic of strengthening our strategic autonomy in all the sectors identified by 2022 I just mentioned. So to face up to these new challenges of multipolar world, the European Union set its own strategic agenda to achieve a free and democratic Europe, a strong and secure Europe, a prosperous and competitive Europe. This means working on our long-term resilience and competitiveness through the 2024 strategic agenda for the coming years. So I think I will briefly touch upon four topics: the single market, innovation, industrial policy, and defense. So first of all, a key point is the construction of a genuine single market, particularly in the key sectors of healthcare, energy, digital technology. We need to revise our regulations to compensate for the fact that we are out of synchronization with the United States and China. Faced with these two states that no longer play by the rules of international trade, we need to protect equal conditions of competition in all the different sectors of our industry, and in particular, in all sectors affected by subsidies. This is what we are beginning to do, as can be seen by the introduction of tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, which has been proposed by the European Commission and approved by the EU. To strengthen European competitiveness, another essential pillar is, second one, innovation. We need to step up our efforts and investment in innovation on a European scale to help players develop and become European champions in a market of 400 million customers. This increase in investment capacity must be directed within key sectors: defense and security, climate change, technology, artificial intelligence, to boost productivity and reinforce our strategic autonomy through an innovation program. In this context, technology is a key sector. The EU needs to be more aggressive in digital advances, and in particular in artificial intelligence, a priority at the heart of the Artificial Intelligence Action Summit, to be held in France on February the 10th and the 11th. The Artificial Intelligence Act adopted by the EU, which provides the first legal framework for artificial intelligence, positions Europe to play a leading role on a global scale. These changes then require a strong, coordinated European response to be ready for environmental, digital, and security changes. European sovereignty, it's my third point, also depends on a coordinated industrial policy based on the implementation of common instruments. And this industrial policy must be coordinated with environmental policy. The aim of the strategic agenda is for Europe to be the first to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 with a European industrial base. The aim is to maintain Europe's industrial and technological strength while becoming a leader in the green and digital technologies of tomorrow. The commitment to the environment and sustainable development must be seen as an opportunity for European companies. To achieve this, we need to strengthen the Green Deal and the Green Deal Industrial Plan as a growth program for Europe, and in particular for the successful transformation of our industrial base. We need to invest more in climate change and clean energy. Climate action can enable the EU to become a bastion of green innovation and investment, gradually reducing its dependence on Russian fossil fuels, increasing its resilience to the effects of climate change, and ensuring it maintains its global position in favor of climate policy by pursuing the 1.5-degree targets. My final major point is on defense. We need to ensure that Europe is strong enough to face up to new emerging threats by integrating our defense sectors. For example, Europe's strategic autonomy in terms of defense can be reflected in its ability to produce defense equipment on our own territory. In this respect, the agreement on the development of the European Peace Facility, which finances EU external action with a military dimension, and on which we rely to support Ukraine with military equipment, has been a tool for transforming the European defense industry. It reaffirms the importance of more effective European defense capabilities, which contribute to transatlantic and global security. This guarantee of security also requires a long-term European commitment to Ukraine in the military, economic, and diplomatic fields. A task made possible in particular by the contact group on the defense of Ukraine, which is also known by the name Rammstein in Germany, in which France and Italy participate. A solid and lasting peace in Europe depends on restoring the rights of the Ukrainian people and continuing to supply them with the equipment they need to defend themselves. Europe must remain united and protect its values by becoming a genuine geopolitical player, guaranteeing security and the principles of international law. So in a nutshell, faced with our economic dependencies and weaknesses, we need to make a collective effort to ensure a more sovereign, more united and stronger Europe in the face of geopolitical, technological, energy and economic issues. A Europe that reduces its industrial and commercial dependence through innovation, investment, and fairer condition of competition. So that was my speech on European issues, but I thank you very much. I thank you very much for your attention, but now obviously I've only touched upon one topic, and I'd be more than I haven't spoken about the great diplomatic crisis, except Ukraine, and I haven't spoken about our diplomatic relations with Italy as well, and I'm more than happy to start a discussion with you on all those topics. Thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Arianna Napoli. I'm a GG2 student from Global Governance. And since you mentioned energy sector in France, and we know that France has a leading role in atomic energy, as you also cited, I was curious about the impact of the energy crisis of last year and this year on France, since it's relatively significant reliability on the atomic sector. And another point is how to extend the atomic energy, since in many European countries, there is a lack of scientific knowledge and maybe scientific terrorism because of the memory of Chernobyl. And people do not know that actually renewable energies kill people too every year. So how to cope with this? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know. It works usually whether I answer a question one by one or whether I should take several, and then up to you really. Well, I can answer very gladly your question. So it's indeed nuclear energy has long been an important topic for us. It's also a matter of debate in Italy at the moment. We follow that very interestingly, and we've always been of the opinion that it's one part of the solution. It's not the only one, of course. It's not a perfect solution. Far from it. We are ourselves growing our nuclear capabilities. So obviously the production is not always exactly the same, but it's a very reliable source of energy compared to others. We strongly believe that we also have to bet on renewable energies. It's clear that's what we are doing. That's what we are luckily doing on a European level. But we are absolutely convinced, and I think it's a matter of fact that certainly nuclear power has a part to play. And certainly in the medium term, it's not possible to achieve European decarbonization and energy independence without nuclear power. You mentioned the debate. It's an extremely sensitive debate, polemical debate with a very strong argument on both sides. So I agree with you. It's important to look at facts, to look to be rational. So for us, we are pleased to see that the tone of the debate, which, as you said, after past nuclear catastrophe was more hostile to nuclear, now has changed. The war of we strongly believe it has to change because of climate change. But I cannot fail to notice that the war on Ukraine, which has showcased our Europe's dependence in energy terms, has also had a role to play in that regard. So I am absolutely convinced that nuclear energy is here to stay as a strong pillar of our energy security, which is not to say that obviously other decarbonated energy are not extremely important to develop.
Hi, I'm Pietro Bagnasco, also from GG, and I wanted to ask you how important it is that Europe develops its own energetic independence from the rest of the world. Like we have seen how dependency for resources, for our energy, that's the core of modern civilization, it is revealed as a weakness in the face of instability through Europe. So how is important that Europe becomes capable through green energies or other energy sources to have an internal network, a very stable internal network that's independent from the rest of the world. I know this view may seem anti-global, but
No, I think it's very important. It's actually has a global impact too, because there are two main reasons actually for energy transition. There is the one you mentioned, sovereignty, and which I touched upon, but there is obviously the other topic of climate change, and our energy policy has to be read in that regard. So in a word, all these points to the fact that we have, and luckily it's planned, and we have this aim, well, those various aims, and also carbon neutrality by 2050. We have to end our dependency on fossil fuels, both for climate change reason, but also because well, we don't produce that many And we see that in a way we end up being at the mercy of countries that can suddenly not be that reliable or friendly any longer. So I think what you mentioned is is almost a consensus idea when we speak about the principle. Now, in the short term, of course, it cannot be made in a day. Actually, I think the EU has reacted very, very positively. I don't think 2 years ago, at the start of Russian aggression in Ukraine, people would have believed that we would be able to diminish our consumption that quickly. Now it's still going to take a bit of time. Different countries are in different position, but it's certainly very important to have that aim. Well, it's valid in the energy sector. It's valid for other things. It's important if we want to be a global power and to secure our way of life and our model to have some sovereignty on all those topics.
So, hello, I'm Federico Lefanti. I wanted to ask a question. We are aware that there is a population distribution problem around Paris and around the capital. I wanted to further get more information about what that problem is and where does it come from. Why is Paris facing such difficulties in regarding the population distribution, because we know a majority of French population lives in Paris or near Paris. So what is the problem where does the problem of distribution comes from? Thank you.
You mean that the fact that in France, contrary to Italy, for example, a great share of the population is concentrated in Paris. That's what you mean. It's a fact. I'm not sure I would characterize it as a problem. It's a challenge for sure. It's a result of history. It's a result of our state's organization. The fact that we've been centralized and strong nation state for many centuries, if not more. We are in a situation that can be compared, for example, with England. Actually, it's pretty similar what there is here. It leads to in a split. It's true, between Paris and what we call the province, rest of the regions, the rest of the country. But I don't think it's a problem in itself. It has to be addressed in the policy of urban planning and economic planning for the whole country. But it is a chance too, because with Paris we have one of the very few true global metropolis, which is able to offer to people coming from the whole world everything that they want in terms of private, but also economic issues. So it's a stronger pull factor for the country. I think a strong advantage. Now it comes with lots of challenges, but they've been addressed for a very long time in France. In the fact that we should. French authorities don't forget the rest of the country. I think the split between Paris and the region is not as strong as it may seem, because actually in Paris, you, as in any capital, many, if not most people, actually have origins in a French region. So it's not as a caricature would show, a difficult kind of person between Paris and the region. Obviously, there are urban issues proper to the city of Paris, which is one of the most densely populated place in the world. Which in itself, being a dense populated area, is good. When we look at climate policies, for example, it allows to provide public services to the citizens in a more climate conscious way than when you spread your town on twice 10 times the size. brings difficulty, but I think, and here it's not only the French authorities, but also the Parisian authorities have worked on it a lot, and Paris has been quite quickly transforming itself into a city that is made for, let's say, the climate change age. And if you've been there, and if you've been there, let's say, 10 years ago and go back today, you would see quite a lot of changes in terms of, for example, cycling lanes, the place of cars, pedestrianization. Most iconic part is the fact that the banks of the Seine less than 10 years ago used to be a motorway, in effect, and now is one of the most beautiful promenade in the world, possibly, and certainly very enjoyable for the population. And another very important, I think, symbol will be the fact that has been seen at the Paris Olympics, but that it's now possible to swim in the Seine River, which is almost incredible when we think that for 100 years it was prohibited. And so obviously it's been the case for the Olympics, but from next year onwards, the Seine River will be open to the general population. And I think there again, in terms of adapting to global change, it's be a huge transformation for Parisians.
Good morning, my name is Aurora Volpi, and my question is, considering different interests at the stake within European member states, like thinking about France and Germany's interest and consequences after Russia-Ukraine war, how do you think it could be possible to unify and combine all the interests in order to pursue an effective and strategic European autonomy and European defense and continuing, let's say, to implement European defense initiatives? Thank you.
So thank you. You mentioned Franco-German action in this regard. I think as far as defense strategic autonomy, so it's something France has been preaching, I think, all along for decades. Sometimes it was not exactly the first topic in the EU. It has completely changed. To that regard, the Russian aggression in Ukraine has helped us. It's very clear. So now you have seen we will have a European Commissioner in Defense, for example. We'll have more European funds for defense. Frankly, a few years ago, it would have seemed completely incredible, and now it's generally accepted. Then what is true for defense is also true for other economic areas. The fact that we also need to develop European champions, which is not easy, because many countries have their national champions in an area as sensitive as defense. But we know that we have to promote cooperation, mergers. So it's true actually in many economic fields, but in defense it's much more strategic and polemical. And it is true that in this field of defense there is also an issue that we have to be aware that we have to promote our own industry, and there is always a tendency every time there is a sudden increase in defense budget, which has been the case for the past years in almost all over Europe, to say, oh, we need to buy something, and there are non-European countries that produce excellent defense gears, of course, and we're going to buy them, and of course sometimes it's necessary and useful, but we think that we have to think long term. We have to make sure that we together, all European member states, we develop our defense industry, and also it's not specifically Franco-German. Actually, it's valid for I think every member state, because comes a day when there is a conflict. If you depend too much on producers that are outside of Europe, well, you're not at your best advantage. It doesn't mean the producers will all, there is a risk they will all become unfriendly country, but if you're not the main producer, you're not always the main priority when there is a choice, when there is not enough weapons for everyone. We cannot always anticipate everything, and we didn't really anticipate our need to provide Ukraine with weapons. And so developing all together, EU member states, our defense industry is certainly a way to achieve our stability. It's something that is really discussed between France and Germany. You are completely right, and we have many projects, but it's really something that is of concern and on which we work with many other member states and obviously Italy as well.
Good morning. Good morning, I'm Benedetta Middei, a second-year student from Global Governance. And what I wanted to ask is, so yesterday we had a conference on the role of the European Union in the post-election period. So we especially focused on the role that Italy has in the European Union and the lacks that Italy has in this so big union and all the projects of the future of our country. Talking about the lacks of Italy, so my country, we talked about the lack of innovation that Italy has, since it's focusing itself only on those which are considered mature technologies, so lacking of innovation, always remaining on those already known technologies. So my question is, would you say that France has the same problem as Italy, so focusing on those already known technologies, mature technologies, or indeed France, or instead France is trying to improve herself, to develop itself through new technologies? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we all have the same challenges and realize that we obviously have to invest more in our research. It is very clear. So it's been very clear for the French authorities for a long time now. So I think President Macron has really had that on his mind and developed a clear policy in that regard. For example, in the technology sector. So that's been quite a few years now that French tech has become a huge priority for us. I think with some successes. We are now, and you are not a specialist in Italy, of course, but you mentioned Italy as well. I think we share completely the same idea that artificial intelligence is something we really need to focus on. Italy does. So I'm spending most of my time this year attending G7 ministerial conferences, since Italy is holding the presidency and accompanying our ministers, and a really successful presidency. And one of the two priorities, if I read well, that I see at almost every Italian ministerial, the other one being Africa, is artificial intelligence. So I can tell you there's a realization that it's an important topic. We will, as I said, we will hold an international conference in that regard. But in February in Paris, we know we have to do that. I think we have had some success, and the world state is really focused on new technologies indeed.
Hi, my name is Adriano Napoli. I'm a GG2 student. I wanted to, you addressed the issue concerning Ukraine, noting that France, Italy, Europe are aligned and continue to provide aid and weapons, also with the support of the United States to Ukraine to defend itself. The war has now been going for a considerable amount of time, and Ukraine's resources are depleting, where Russia too will likely struggle to sustain the conflict much longer. Do you believe that Europe and the United States are doing everything possible to help achieving really the peace between these two nations? And do you foresee Ukraine in the joining NATO? And also, do you think that the relations with Russia can be restored once the conflict ends? Thank you.
Thank you. So it's indeed one of the, obviously one of the prime international topic of the past years, the other one being, of course, the Middle East. And there is a great admiration really on our part for the Ukrainian people. And certainly we are completely committed to restoring the rights of the Ukrainian people to their independence, and it's really to be commended what Ukraine does. Really an amazing resistance. I think the international community is more or less united, luckily, among the EU, the US to support Ukraine. You're speaking about peace. It is the aim. we want peace between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, that is what we have to achieve. Then we have to look at what peace means. Of course, peace cannot mean surrender. We don't at this very moment see a great deal of willingness of Russia to enter into meaningful peace negotiations. But that is the aim, of course, peace in Ukraine, and for after that peace, there is no reason why we should not have go back to normal positive relation with Russia. I think we are not at war with Russia, with the Russian people, for sure not. I think France is a bit like Italy in that regard. There is a great century-old sympathy in France for Russian culture, the Russian people links. So it's really I don't think there would be a problem to reconnect. Now, at that very moment, we are facing this unacceptable aggression. We are seeing the absolutely marvelous resistance of the Ukrainian people for its freedom, and we stand ready to support it as long as is necessary.
Hi, my name is Nina Segnalini, and I would like to ask you your opinion about how France is dealing with the Middle East war between Israeli and Palestinian, and if you feel that the government is representing the willing of citizen, or if there is a sort of watershed between what the governments are doing and what the people are wanting. Thank you.
So it's a hugely important topic for our government, of course. I think, as in many other countries, I suppose Italy as well, French public opinion is divided. You would find people holding views that can be on the two ends of the spectrum, very unsimilar. But it doesn't prevent us, the French government, for playing a role, giving a great deal of attention to this conflict. Actually, it's not only since the horrific attack of 7th of October last year, but it's always been the case. I would say that in the short term, especially since then, France has been trying to play a role in Lebanon, which is a country for which France has huge interest, huge connections, of course, for many reasons. So we have, and that's not new, and that's been the case actually for decades. But we have been trying to mediate between the various factions in Lebanon to try and stabilize the country, to try, if you know the country, to find a consensus, to help to find a consensus to have a presidential election, for example, because there is no president in Lebanon at the moment. Or also, that's really a topic where French authorities, ministers pay a great deal of use a great deal of their time. I don't think that's polemical in the French that part in the French society. Now, what is more, of course, sensitive is the direct reaction to the Gaza, to what happens in Gaza since 7th of October, and I think the French authorities have having a balanced position in obviously condemning in the strongest term the horrific attack. Was let's say a mastermind chef has just been killed, which were the biggest anti-Semitic attack in the world since World War II. And we always reaffirm the right of Israel to defend itself. Of course, it's normal. We also, and frankly, like the European countries like Italy, we also constantly reaffirmed that this defense has to be done while respecting international law, international humanitarian law, international law of the armed conflict. So we also been very attentive to that. We've also commented many episodes of this conflict. We've also permanently called for a ceasefire on the ground, be it in Lebanon or in Gaza, to stop the conflict with the release of the hostages, of course. It's a bit like in other countries, it's a bit like in Italy, hugely sensitive, but I think the French authorities managed to have a reasonable and balanced position, and let's hope in the short term we manage to arrive at this form of ceasefire to end this.
Hello, I'm Diego Del Valle, also from Global Governance, and I want to ask, as a French diplomat in Italy, how do you see the Libyan civil war, where Italy and France support two different sides, France with the General Haftar and Italy with the recognized government from ONU?
So thanks. I will a bit qualify what you've said, of course, because I think both France and Italy are obviously committed to finding a peaceful solution in Libya. Of course, it's a country of great Italian interest. It's near Italy. It's true we have been active there. Almost for years, trying to find solution. Honestly, it's very difficult. You describe the situation with fighting factions. It's a sad situation where in a country that actually has potential to be a great country for its population. It's also an area of concern for the EU. We've always pleaded, but I think France and Italy together at a time where it was less natural, let's say, for the EU, that we had to look together at our southern neighbors, that it was a great priority. I think there is a Franco-Italian consensus on that. I see all the action that the Italian government is taking in that regard. So I don't. There is no Franco-Italian opposition in that regard, but a great willingness to see the situation advancing towards peace. Is to be honest, it's really not easy, and I cannot guarantee that it will happen in the short term.
Good morning. I'm Beatrice Gentile from Global Governance also. Touching on your previous discussion about climate change, I read about the recent floods in the southern part of France. So I wanted to ask, to what extent is France ready to tackle the climate-related issues and the climate-related disasters? And also, is there internal consensus or national legislation on the topic? Thank you.
It is a topic that is hugely important for the French population. It's I think among young people constant preoccupation, and years after years it has really moved to the top of the political level. So I think there is more or less a consensus in that regard in France, of the danger of climate change, of the necessary adaptation. You are completely right. We are touched by climate events, just like Italy, of course. We don't really know where it's going to go. For years we thought we were going to have droughts and that it would be terrible for our agriculture and even our way of life. And now, if you know people in France, they will surely tell you that actually for the past year it sounds like it's actually raining non-stop. But we've had for years to tackle this. So we're tackling this at the global level by making it a priority at the COP international negotiation. I think negotiations where the EU is playing a very, very positive role in terms of what we are fixing ourselves in terms of objective, in terms also about financial resources we are committing to help other countries in the world to achieve their objectives. It doesn't mean we should not be ready to adapt ourselves. It is true. I think the legislation in France has been pretty strict on, for example, environment. You're speaking about flooding, where exactly to build your house, so on. I think the legislation is quite satisfactory. But something we will not avoid. Also, we probably a bit more than Italy, we have some coasts, for example, that are receding in Western France, where the coasts are not made of rock but of sands. And we have already had cases of people having the houses that have been that have disappeared under the sea, more or less. Where it will happen. We have to be ready. But I touched upon it briefly when we spoke about Paris, for example. We have to adapt our towns. We really believe that we have to go to a way of life that will be less based on carbon. So just to add up on what I said on Paris, for example, we have had in France, and it's still going on, one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the world, which is to create hundreds of kilometers of underground metro around Paris. Not only in Paris, there is basically a metro almost everywhere, so there's no need to do more. But around in the suburbs, where for a long time, well, in some towns, it was difficult to, maybe not to reach the center, but to move around. And now we have all those new, for example, it's just an example, metro lines that have been, the first ones have been opened during the Olympics, but for the next 10 years, many will be opened. And our general aim is to have a greener way of life. I think there's an aspiration to that in France. And in that regard, we are getting ready, but it doesn't mean we will not have any impact. Of course, it's impossible.
Hi, I'm Benedetta Mondini. I'm a global governance student too. And my question tackles, I think, a big challenge that many European countries are facing right now. So we know that in recent years, Europe has faced a big problem of migration. So driven by conflicts or economic issues, climate change from countries like Middle East, Africa, South Asia, and so on. So my question is, how does France, as a key member of the European Union, has addressed and still addresses the ongoing migration crisis, both within its borders and as a part of the broader European response? Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, you're touching on a very important topic. Actually, today, I mentioned the ambassador was going to this meeting of our Prime Minister with Vice President Tajani, but actually our Interior Home Affairs Minister will be there again, and at that very moment, I think, are starting their meeting at our border. They already met 2 weeks ago around in the margins of the G7 Home Affairs Minister. So you've seen it's become a huge topic. Let's say it's been on an agenda for a long time for us, even before the 2015 migration crisis, because we've always had this thing of having this border with the UK, where like for 20 years, maybe now we've had migration issues. We have to address it on many levels. There is no one clear solution. We have to address it obviously with preventing, like giving people reasons to stay in their country. That's a huge part of the solution, of course. We have to address it at the completely the other end of the spectrum with our integration policies in France, of course, which we're doing, and let's say in the middle part, we've had all these debates around EU legislation. So we've adopted the EU Migration Pact, which is a very positive way forward. As you know, it's been adopted, but actually most of the measures are not yet into force. Including new procedures at the European external border. It will, I think, be a part of the solution. Once it is, we will see also things improving. What I see very positively, honestly, since I've been here for a year in Rome, is also the cooperation improving. Especially between France and Italy. At the very beginning of the climate crisis several years ago, the recent migration crisis, obviously the first reaction of countries can be, let's look at ourselves and let's because we can take national measures very quickly. European, it takes more time. But I think now there is complete realization for almost all EU member states that we have to work together. We've passed this migration pact. It's been a very, very difficult negotiation for years. Maybe we will have new proposals. Now the president of the European Commission is already not even in a second term discussing this. It might be necessary. Clearly, we have to look at it on the European level, because we also want to defend our free movement of persons within the EU, an important heritage of the European construction. I'm positive in seeing all the movement, all the coordination, the cooperation, the laws that have been passed, laws that possibly will be. Now, what Europe does is only one part of the issues, and we also have to look at why people are leaving their country, what we can do to make sure that fewer do, and it's part development policy. It's part also all the action we have to try and make sure there is more peace, because part of the people who move, not all of them, but part of them is obviously fleeing an armed conflict, and it's something also where we have to act. But you've touched upon on one of the biggest challenges of the months and years ahead, for sure.
Hello, I wanted to ask a question. I'm Gigi, student. Since we talked about global warming, I wanted to ask something that it's completely different. And the main question is, due to all the problems and all of the tensions that have been raised after the rise of the far right party in France, the motion of removal of Macron, and the war that is going on outside from France in the Middle East and in Ukraine, how is France dealing with these internal and external problems? I don't know.
So we have a very interesting internal political life in France. To some extent, political life in France has been a bit nearing what was more like the norm in Italy in the recent past. As you know, we now in a situation where we have obviously a government, but which doesn't automatically has a majority in our National Assembly, which is an interesting situation, which is not the first time we have that, but maybe the first time to that extent. Now we have a functioning government, which is able, thanks to the Constitution of the Fifth Republic, to govern, which the Constitution is providing with many tools for the government to pass laws, for example, even when it doesn't have a full majority in Parliament, which has been used many times in our system. So the current government can function. It has, just as I read in Italy, obviously we are at the time of budget negotiation, which is very always in every country a difficult moment. So it's exactly the same sensitivity in France, but we have a program and we are in a situation also. If you're familiar with French domestic politics, you might know that in the past we've had several examples of what we have called cohabitation, where we have had a president of one party and a prime minister, National Assembly of another, former opposition. It has worked. Here we're not exactly in that situation. It's even more interesting because we have a prime minister which is not from the president's party, but is not completely opposition either. So there's a form of continuity, but a form of change with the previous government. I suppose for political scientists, it must be absolutely fascinating to follow our system. Now, since you were mentioning specifically what consequences it can have on, let's say, the big diplomatic crisis in the world, well, we have this. The Constitution does give a specific role to the president in as far as foreign affairs and defense are concerned. And on top of that has been developed what is more tradition than based on legal text, tradition that the French president has what we call domaine réservé, which means really a specific role in that matter, going even further than what the Constitution ascribes him. So you have seen and you will go on seeing President Macron active on the international stage, for example, even at the European Council, which in a way is international, but in many ways domestic too. It's President Macron who has represented France. He will go on speaking on everything that is, and also having a strong input on everything that is linked to the use of our armed forces. And actually, to that regard, the situation is less difficult than what we've had when we had the cohabitation, where really the president and the prime minister were political opponents. And still the president in those circumstances, it was last time a bit more than 20 years ago, still played a role. So here I have no doubt that since we are not in this real opposition, the president and the prime minister will definitely find ways to cooperate, all the more than actually, whereas in France, as in many countries, you obviously have very different views when you look at economic and social policies, social issues, and so on. When it goes to international issues, there is more of a common ground. I'm not saying every single political party says the same thing, but I suppose when you look on big international issues, it's easier than if you ask everyone what they think, for example, of the pension reform. Like it's easier to find common ground. So it won't be a problem for France's voice in the world, for example. No.
Unfortunately, our time is up, but there are still one or two questions. Would you like to take them or you
Sure,
are
well, with pleasure.
okay?
Okay, I'm Umay. I am from Turkey. I would like to ask what is the policies, France policies about Islamophobia in France right now?
Well, obviously, we have so we have peculiar system in France as far as relationship between state and religion is, which is what we call laïcité, which is actually sometimes a bit difficult to translate, but which means a very strong separation between state and religion, which has been a peculiarity in France since it's been the case in 1905, at a time where it really didn't exist much in the world. So the state is there separate with no religious wall whatsoever. We could look on details, but let's say broadly speaking, no religious interference. But then obviously granting to everyone the right to pursue their religious beliefs and their equality and non-discrimination. So hugely important. So the French authorities are really there to guarantee that everyone has got his right and that no one is obviously discriminated, pursued because of his or her religion. That's worse for Islam. That's worse for obviously Jews or Christians or any kind of religions in France. I'm not saying that there are no problems in French society. That is clear. But as far as the French authorities are concerned, religion, it's a private matter, but it's an important private matter, and clearly everyone should be able to feel free practicing its own her religion. I think France is one of the European country with biggest number of Muslim people. We are not having any statistics. It wouldn't, but clearly there is a huge place in France for people for Muslim French people, of course.
Good morning again. I am Elena Lamy. And before asking my question, I would like to read a statement made by the President Emmanuel Macron during the first day of September. He stated that the European perspective on AI must be an alternative to the Chinese and American phones. So stated also that many articles are being written in regard of the current geopolitical climate, which is described as a second Cold War. My question is it correct, in your opinion, to compare this race to AI that is taking place between the major power blocks to the space race that took place in the 20th century? Thank you.
I think it's even more important. The space race, of course, it was very important to capture imagination of the population, and in a way, it was part scientific, of course, space, but it's also part of a status symbol, of course. It was the first to go to the moon, to go to space, and so on. But the direct consequence for the population did exist, but were probably less visible and less quick than what we have with artificial intelligence. So I think really we are on another scale. I'm not saying it's a war, but what I'm saying is to just with your final question, if I understand the closing, what I started saying, it's a question of sovereignty. If we want to be sure to go on with our way of life, with our values, and with, I think, our model that we all enjoy in the European Union that we've chosen, well, we have to have autonomy. We have to be sure that we have the possibility to decide of our future in all the important areas. So we've spoken of many this morning. There is energy, for example, defense, but there is AI. we think I'm pretty sure you are all convinced already on the impact that artificial intelligence can have. Well, it will not stop, it will grow, that's clear. And so we have to make sure that we also have in the European Union the capabilities to have our own tools, also to be able to regulate what we use. So it's normal that there can be a few tensions in that regard, but at least what can be said is, I think there is, and very quickly, since the topic is relatively new, there is now the realization among, I think, everyone at the European table that it's an important topic and that we need to act. So that's the positive thing. Now, a lot remains to be done, but since it's there in almost every single meeting, I am confident that we will move towards this autonomy.
Thank you very much for being here today with us. Thank you also on behalf of the Diplomacy Festival and Mr. Bartolmucci, who unfortunately had to leave urgently. Thank you again, and it's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Guys, for the signature in this corner and the next